For many Americans, Memorial Day weekend is the unofficial start of summer. We fire up the grill, get out the insect repellent, and fill up the backyard pool. Others grab the sunscreen, pack up the kids, and head for the beach. However, summer isn't carefree for parents. Most of us keep an eye on our children whenever they're in the water, but sometimes even that isn't enough to prevent a tragedy.
The drowning person inevitably was surrounded by bathers who did not realize that the drowning was taking place.
Dr. Francesco Pia made a discovery that revolutionized water safety in the early 1970s. It happened by chance when he filmed rescues at Orchard Beach in the Bronx, where he was a lifeguard and trainer for 21 years.
On the film, there's one instance where two children are drowning. Their parents are 10 feet away, 15 feet away from them, looking directly at them. And they don't have any idea that their children are engaging in a life and death struggle. And typically, investigations by state health departments and coroners have confirmed that fact, that either lifeguards were looking at the struggle and didn't recognize it, or parents were looking at the struggle and didn't recognize it.
Around 700 children under the age of 15 drown each year in the United States, about half of them within 75 feet of a parent or another adult. How could they miss it? It turns out that people who are drowning don't look the way most of us think they do, as Pia's film graphically displayed for the first time. Hollywood portrays drowning with thrashing and cries for help. But Pia says if you can hear someone calling, they aren't drowning, at least not yet.
Swimmers in distress are the ones that we see in the movies, where there is someone who is lifting up their arm and waving for help, calling out for help. The reason they can do that is the reason they can lift up their arms and wave for help, is because they have a swimming or floating skill. And if you have a swimming or floating skill, by definition, you are not yet drowning. They can also call out for help because they're able to keep their mouth above the surface of the water and call out for help.
Drowning is very quiet. There can be some splashing, but there's certainly no waving. There's no calls for help, and almost no speech of any kind.
That's Mario Vittone, a retired marine safety specialist with the United States Coast Guard.
Drowning is a deceptively quiet event. It really doesn't take the form that we see in television and movies, and the misperceptions about it reach everywhere. It's not just the people in the general public. I've seen rescue training films by rescue organizations, and the portrayal of a drowning victim for the sake of the training video is completely off.
Pia says when someone's drowning, their response is completely instinctive. You may think someone would certainly cry out for help, but the respiratory system is focused on preventing suffocation first. An outcry isn't possible.
They can't call out for help because their mouth is sinking below and reappearing above the surface of the water, during which time, when the mouth goes below the surface of the water, the person will close their mouth. When their arms press down on the surface of the water and their mouth breaks the surface of the water, they will exhale, inhale, and then sink below the surface of the water again.
Drowning people don't thrash in the water either. Instead, they may look like they're dog paddling. The victim is simply trying to lift himself up.
When the brain perceives that we're not getting enough air in to breathe, that we are suffocating, automatically the brain sends out an order to the person who is drowning. Get the mouth above the surface of the water so that we can continue to live and breathe. So what the drowning person does is they extend their arms either partially out to the sides or fully out to the sides and attempt to use the surface of the water as a platform where they can press down and raise their mouth up above the surface of the water.
Heads bobbing up and out of the water, minor splashing, or like they're climbing a ladder that isn't there is another common look. But it can also look like they're just treading water. I've seen it to where their heads are almost always back, looking up is one good indication because they're trying to get their mouth up, and looking back brings your mouth up. Looking down at the pool from the lifeguard stand, let's say, just someone looking up in the air, that can be drowning. There's other things to look for. Eyes glassed over. If the victim has long hair, it may be over their eyes. And the hair over the eyes is an indication to watch someone for drowning because usually you tend to wipe that away. But if you don't control your arm movement because you're drowning, you won't wipe it away.
All of those pointers on what drowning really looks like can certainly help keep kids safe this summer. But Pia says prevention is a lot better. If a child experiences a near drowning, most likely a lot of failures have already occurred. Perhaps the pool isn't surrounded by a fence with a self-closing, self-latching, child-proof lock. Perhaps adults weren't around at all or weren't supervising closely.
Supervision means being actively engaged in watching the child. Because the statistics that have been gathered over the years by CDC and other organizations show that rather than there being a lack of supervision by the parents, there's been a lapse in supervision, and the lapse is generally 5 minutes or less. So for parents, they have to realize that they cannot be on a cell phone talking when children are swimming in the pool, cannot be reading a book, and cannot be engaged in any other activities other than watching children in the backyard pool.
One of the things that happens a lot is the parents believe that being there close by is the same thing as watching, because there's this perception that, well, I'll hear them if they're in trouble. And actually, that's the sign. If you don't hear them, they're in trouble. Kids in the water make noise. They play, they scream, they run around. And when they get quiet, it's either because they're fine and quiet or they're not. But if they certainly will not be making noise if they're drowning. They won't be yelling, they won't be crying, they won't be screaming. They'll be making no sounds of any kind.
Above all, Pia says, parents must know CPR. He says there's no worse feeling in the world than to haul a child out of the water and have to wait helplessly for paramedics to arrive. The Consumer Product Safety Commission has a complete website on water safety at poolsafely.gov. That's poolsafely.gov. If you'd like to know more about On Drowning, Dr. Frank Pia's video that started it all, you can find a link on our webpage, radiohealthjournal.net. Our production director is Sean Waldron. I'm Nancy Benson.
Atrial fibrillation, or AFib, is the most common type of irregular heartbeat. AFib patients are 5 times more likely to have a stroke than people without AFib. But patients, caregivers, and physicians alike still need to learn more about the AFib-stroke connection, according to a white paper by the Heart Rhythm Society, National Stroke Association, sponsored by Boehringer Ingelheim. Dr. David Frankel of the University of Pennsylvania chaired the working group.
We identified barriers to effective communication and saw that patients are not making the critical link between AFib and stroke. It's also important for people to learn the common symptoms of stroke and the devastating impact of stroke on quality of life. By improving education and communication, we can help lower the risk of stroke for patients living with this common heart rhythm disorder.
These findings were published in the Heart Rhythm Journal and the Journal of Stroke and Cerebrovascular Diseases. More information and resources are available at myafib.org and stroke.org/afib-stroke.
I have to get to sleep.
Tom had a stressful day, and now he can't shut down at bedtime.
Need sleep.
To fall asleep fast, millions of people turn to Unisom sleep gels. They're non-habit forming and quickly help you sleep soundly so you wake recharged. Tom? Unisom sleep gels. A stressful day deserves a restful night. Use as directed. Active ingredient diphenhydramine hydrochloride.